Two from Galilee. A love story by Marjorie Holmes.
In our last readings from the book Two from Galilee by Marjorie Holmes, we were finishing up to the angel speaking to Joseph, telling him all about the truth of the child that was within Mary. Joseph now believes, and Joseph is ready to go to Mary and to become a husband to her, even though he's not the father of her child. Of course, the Lord is the father of Mary's child. There was one problem, though. Joseph's father died suddenly, and Joseph had to stay near his family through the period of mourning. Now we see Joseph preparing to get ready to go see Mary, who's visiting Elizabeth. Don't delay, the angel had said. Yet in common decency he could not leave until after the period of mourning for his father. To do so would be too cruel to his mother and only make things harder for Mary. But he made his plans for the journey, even as he grieved for Jacob his father. Then on the final day of mourning, Joseph saw her. He felt at first that it must be an illusion. His head was light from fasting. The hot day tricked the eyes. He thought it must be only a mirage, the donkey plodding along with the likeness of the beloved on his back. But it was her. Then the beast drew nearer. He could hear the clop of hooves, its labored breathing, and the girl who rode the donkey ordered it to halt. She was Mary, yet she was not Mary, for she had been gone so long. He was afraid that he was dreaming. He was too weak and shaken to acknowledge the reality of her just yet. She slid down, took a step toward him where he stood in the yard, but he lifted a hand to keep her away, for he was unclean. He had touched his father's corpse. "Joseph," she stood, trembling, all her anticipation draining away. "Joseph, aren't you happy to see me?" He dared to look at her then, desperately recreating the shape of her beauty, the dusky hair, damp and curling, the full, sweet mouth, the luminous eyes. She was different. He felt the aura of the city about her, the fine house of her Aunt Elizabeth, the magnificence of the temple. She had pushed her veil back, and he saw that her hair was brushed in a new way. She wore gold circlets in her ears. Her gown was too fine for Nazareth. There was a mantle of blue shimmering stuff across her shoulders. He stood dazed and rocked and afraid of her, this angel so suddenly descended, this woman whose body bulged with the fruit of God. He was aware of his garment of sackcloth, the cruel lacerations upon his face and arms, and now, startled, she too became aware of all this. "Joseph, you're in mourning. Who?" "My father, Jacob." "Oh, no." Her eyes went dim. "He was such a joyful man. I'd looked forward to having his laughter in our house. Oh, Joseph, I too grieve for the father of my beloved." He could not answer for the longing that assaulted him, to touch her, to hold her, the sheer relief. He must wait until his knees had steadied, until he had overcome this terrible desire to throw himself at her feet and weep as he'd not wept even for his father. He turned his face aside. "What brings you back to Nazareth?" "My need for you, Joseph," she said simply. "We learned of a caravan that was coming up from Hebron, and I was allowed to join them. Also, my aunt is expecting a child, and her time is upon her. It isn't fitting that a virgin remain in the house at birth." She glanced down at the curve of her waist. A smile touched her lips. "Even such a virgin as I." "Mary, oh blessed Mary, my blessed, my beloved, forgive me for ever doubting you. I know now, I do know." He did crouch then at her feet. He could not help it, and he kissed the hem of her garment and told her of the visit of the angel. At the house of Mary's parents, her sister Salome spied her first. "Here comes Mary leading the donkey," she shouted to her mother on the rooftop. "Mary, Mary's come home!" She set down the lamp she'd been cleaning and rushed to meet her, skirts flying, little Micah and Judith close behind. They flung themselves into her arms, laughing and asking questions and demanding to know what she'd brought them from Jerusalem. "Hush, hush," Mary begged. "Wait a minute." She put aside the children as gently as she could. She was tired, and anxiety warred with her at being home. "Here," she fumbled inside of her bag and brought forth a parcel of presents. "The tops are for you, too. I brought you an Egyptian doll, Salome. I hope you're not too old for it." She glanced about eagerly, nervously, for she had so much to tell before Joseph came to fetch her. "Where are the others?" "Well, Mother's up flailing barley. She's coming. She heard us. And Father, he's in the stable with Esau." "Mother!" The word was a choked little cry as Hannah came hastening down the steps. "Mother, I'm home." They clung together, weeping and exclaiming, touching each other awkwardly because of the embarrassing burden between them. Hannah was aware of Salome's troubled eyes. The boys had darted off to try out their tops. "Go fetch your father," Hannah ordered Salome, still gazing upon her firstborn. She wiped her dusty hands on her tunic. She clenched her small red fists, regathering herself. It was needful to resist these tides of love to your children. If you did not, you were lost. For her heart's darling was back, no longer safely in the keeping of her aunt, even though that separation had been agony. And although Hannah was near to swooning in her joy, a part of her recoiled. For she also beheld that it was true, what the cousins were whispering, and half the town was saying, and what Joachim himself had seen. And although he had told her, and Mary herself had forewarned them long ago, until this moment it had simply not been true. "I've been counting the hours until we reached Nazareth," Mary said. "To see me or to see Joseph? I should think you'd do well to be counting the hours until you could reach the husband who might be willing to hide your shame." Mary winced. Her face paled. "Must you speak so to me, Mother, when I'm so weary and so glad to be home?" "I speak out of my terrible concern. You must forgive me. I also speak out of my own weariness." Hannah turned on her heel. "Come into the house now and rest. Let me bathe your feet. Let me take off your fine clothes. Why did you wear them on the road?" she scolded with her old inconsistency and petulance. "Such beautiful garments don't seem practical for traveling." "I put them on only a little while ago when the caravan stopped to rest. I wanted to look nice when I first saw my dear ones after so long." "Well, I suppose we can thank Elizabeth for them." "Yes, my aunt was very kind to me and very generous." "She can afford to be." "She sends her love, Mother, her dearest love, and there are gifts in my knapsack. She, too, is soon to deliver. Her time was upon her even as I left. By now your sister surely holds in her arms the baby she's prayed for so long. Surely you can spare your sister and my aunt a moment of rejoicing and tenderness." Hannah's hands were trembling as she squatted to pull off her daughter's sandals. "I'm sorry. All week I've sat with the mourners so that my whole outlook is surely forlorn." She dipped a gourd into the stone jug that stood by the doorstep and began to sponge Mary's swollen feet. "Jacob Ben Ezra died. Did you know that?" "Joseph told me only a little while ago." "Then you've seen him?" "Yes, I've seen him, and he's coming for me, Mother. He'll be here to get me within the hour." "No, no!" Hannah cried out, and there was a great tearing asunder within her. "Wait, come inside. Let's say no more of this until your father appears. Joachim!" she called shrilly. Her husband heard her in the stable where he was fumbling with a broken plow handle. There was such urgency in her voice that he flung it from him and started up the path, knowing that it had something to do with Mary. "Now? This night?" For some reason, Joachim was dismayed as well. Like Hannah, he had risen to the occasion of death, even felt a certain sense of connection, as if some force beyond themselves were thrusting the families into the mesh of each other, whether they willed it or not. But he recognized with remorse that there had also been a certain expedience in his daily going down to tend their stock and bring them food or wine. He needed Joseph's goodwill. It had been weeks since their conversation, and Joseph had not made his intentions known yet. But now that salvation had been offered them, his relief was less than his sense of loss. "But you can't go, Mary. You've been away 3 months and you're only home just now." "I must be with my husband, Father. Surely you see how it is with me. Even the children have noticed." Mary knelt down by her dowry chest, sorting out the things she would need soonest: sheets, napkins, a pair of goat's hair pillows, linens that she and her mother had worked on so peacefully when it seemed that her marriage would be consummated not in haste but in celebration. "I'd love to stay longer. I've missed you, and I have so much to tell you." She thought about the wonders of Jerusalem, the temple, the gracious ways of Elizabeth's house. "But surely you'll agree that the sooner I go to live with my husband, the better." Hannah said, "Then you know what people are saying about you." "Yes, and I know how much it must have hurt you, which is all the more reason I must hurry to go to my husband's house." "His house? His house is not yet finished, and his mother's house is a house of mourning." "He has sent the mourners home," Mary told them, rising with linens in her arm. "He's washing himself even now, and changing to other clothes. He's bade his mother and his sisters to prepare the evening meal, and if you're willing, if you and my father will come to share it, it will add to our happiness," she said wistfully. The children came bursting in, quarreling over their tops, and hobbling behind them was little Esau, who'd been watering the ox. "Mary!" His sightless face was shining. His arms were outstretched. "You're here! You come home for your wedding!" His mother snatched him from the embrace before his hands could discover what his eyes had not seen. "Hush, there will be no wedding." "No wedding?" he said, bewildered. Then in a rush of understanding, he said, "Well, but our cousin Deborah's to be married next week. That'll be wedding enough." "Hush, hush," said Hannah. "Don't speak of weddings." She made a grimace of pain. "Go away, all of you. We have things to discuss." She went to the chest and began to finger its contents. "No wedding," she said with self-pity. "No happy procession. No torches. No music. No feast. After all of our plans, that our daughter should only be led off with bowed head into a small crowded cave of a house where the dead have lain." Joachim spoke up. "Let's not bemoan the matter of a wedding. Rather, let's be thankful that Joseph is still willing to take our daughter as his wife." "Father's right," said Mary. "What if I had been betrothed to someone else? Is it likely that another man would accept my story and have me as I am?" "He's always loved you beyond reason," said Hannah. "He's simply unwilling to give you up." "Surely you aren't saying that it would be better if Joseph were the kind of man who'd abandon me?" "Listen to Mary," said Joachim. "Knowing that the child she carries is not his, then Joseph is indeed doing a noble thing." But Father," said Mary, "Joseph believes." The wonder of it rose up in Mary, lending a new radiance to her tense face. "He believes. He's not taking me out of kindness to spare me, or even because of his love for me, but only because at last he too believes." She gazed from one parent to the other, her whole being alive with it. "He knows now that this is not shame that has befallen me, but honor. I am to be honored above all women." And so we end our story today near the end of chapter 13, and tomorrow we find out what happens when finally Joseph and Mary get together and make a home together as we listen for another episode of Two from Galilee.